You are listening to part 47 of our series, 7 Medicines, The Wise Woman Way, with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio. Hello, Susan. Welcome back to Time Monk Radio.
Hi, Gemini. I hope you continue to be pain-free.
I am pain-free.
Certainly with all of those herbal allies by your side, it's easier and easier to be pain-free. And pain-free while improving your health. You know, many people, myself included, are reluctant to take painkillers. My sweetheart, is just like a lot more willing to take a painkiller than I am. And if he sees me in pain, he'll say, why don't you, take one of these? And I'm like, no, not good for me. Yeah. And I find that attitude kind of spills over to herbs. And so I want to say again that what Elizabeth Kubler-Ross taught us is very important, that the body in pain is not a body that's engaging in healing. And to use the herbs that help us relieve pain, I think, is a very wise course to know and to have on hand herbs that can help you relieve the simple, everyday pain of living in a body, can help you think better and in a way that is more dramatic than it seems at first, really take charge of your health. Because when we're thinking better and we're in less pain, we're less likely to be led astray by others' opinion about what we should do about our health. So, I said last week that it was time for us to take a long view here. And by that, I mean to look at some industry practices. And, of course, this is very timely. And much of what I'm about to talk about is, in fact, from a recent issue of Time magazine. And that's May 30th, 2016. This issue, and this article by Haley Sweetland Edwards, intends to help us understand that the drug industry is basically unregulated, unlikely to be regulated, and enjoying both remarkable advantages and remarkable profits. 4.4 billion prescriptions were dispensed in the U.S. in 2015. That's an average of about 14 prescriptions per American. Now, let's put this into, kind of place here. Because I talked to a couple of people and I said, wow, 14 prescriptions. Do you take 14 different drugs? And while it's true there are people taking that many, in fact, because we are looking at a yearly amount, 14 includes refills. And so someone who's taking only 2 drugs would easily have that 14. So it's not quite as bad as it seems. But 4.4 billion prescriptions, that's still a lot of prescriptions. Roughly half of every single American takes a prescription medication. That's a lot. And the average out-of-pocket cost for the prescription in the past 5 years has gone from about $36 to about $44. What's, of course, caused the drug costs to be in the news is that Valiant, a drug company, made a huge hike on their product. They raised the price by more than 300%. And Valiant said, well, sure, we doubled and tripled the prices of drugs, but other drug makers have been doing that. Drug makers increased the prices of their drugs by an average of 16% per year. Yeah, every year the price of those drugs goes up 10 to 16%. So Valiant said, hey, over a few years they're doing what we're doing. We just did it, all at once. The biggest drug companies posted profit margins in the first quarter of 2016 that were greater than 30%. Just to put this in perspective, Walmart's profit margin for the same quarter was 3.5%. Total U.S. spending on drugs is up over 12% from 2014 to 2015, and pharmaceutical companies' revenues rose 8.5% over that period. The total U.S. spending on medicines is forecast to reach about $640 billion in the year 2020, and that is more than the current U.S. military budget. The first thing we have to understand about drug prices is that the rules of supply and demand do not apply here. It's not a free market system. It's not rational like that, because sick patients aren't normal consumers and therapeutic drugs aren't normal products. Patients, let's face it, typically lack the knowledge and the options to compare the cost and quality of various medications. And even when they do, and I'm inserting this, they are not likely to get the results they want. We're going to be talking about that later, the black market on drugs and what's happening when people try to get a cheaper drug. The whole problem is exacerbated by our insurance-based system, which shields people from the real impact of a drug's price and thus drives us up spending overall. It gets even worse when it comes to drugs that deal with life-threatening illnesses or extremely rare illnesses. Wilson's disease is a rare inherited disorder, and Berna has this disease. There is a drug, Cyprine, which treated. Valiant, the company we were talking about, bought that drug in 2010, and by 2015 had increased the price of the drug over 3,000%.
That's vulgar.
In 2013, Berna's copay was $700 a year. Next year, it is projected to exceed $10,000.
Wow.
And her health plan is going to be on the hook for over $250,000.
Mm.
This is not the free market here. She doesn't have a choice. It's not like, which drug should I take for my condition. This is the only drug she can take, and so she has to pay whatever price is asked. Federal rules that regulate the drug industry are also distorting the prices of the drugs because the government requires Medicare to cover every cancer treatment approved by the FDA, no matter how expensive it is. Basically, the drug companies say you have to pay for it, and Medicare says, okay, you tell us how much you want to charge. What are we told? We are told all the time, well, we have to charge a whole lot for the drugs because it takes a lot of money and a lot of effort and a lot of time to get a new drug to market. It's true. Shepherding a new drug to market can run a pharmaceutical company about $2.5 billion. But when you actually look at how much money is being made off these drugs, that $2.5 billion is not so much. And what the companies then do is, rather than just patent the drugs, they patent all the little pieces of the process, like how the medicine is manufactured, what kind of capsule that it comes into, the color, and they keep re-upping the life of the patents by slightly changing these things, and thus they can prevent their drugs from becoming generic drugs. For instance, Humira, the anti-inflammatory drug, has a patent which expires this December. The company that owns it said, don't worry, we filed 70 additional patents, and it's going to keep the drug absolutely competition-free. In fact, any company seeking to market a biosimilar version of Humira will have to contend with our extensive patent estate, which we intend to enforce vigorously. Between 2010 and January of 2016, they increased the wholesale price of Humira by 138%. 2 doses cost $1,600 in 2010. They now cost $3,800. The company that owns Humira has to date made more than $53 billion from this one drug, and by 2020 they expect Humira alone to deliver them $18 billion per year. Did I say $2.5 billion is nothing? It's hard for us to think in such big numbers. It's hard for us to really take in the size of what is going on here. The drug industry has the biggest profits of any industry. Amgen, 34%. Biogen, 36%. Gilead Science, 46%. From 2012 to the middle of 2015, more than $50 billion in new capital poured into the drug industry, and that also changed things. Instead of focusing on research and development, which does not deliver immediate gains, drug companies have looked to deliver short-term gains by raising the prices of their product. For 20 of the biggest drug companies, 80% of shareholder earnings in 2014 were the result of price increases. Between 2010 and early 2016, Pfizer pain medication Lyrica increased in price by 156%. Merck's diabetes remedy Januvia doubled its wholesale price. How do you regulate an industry that spends more on lobbying than any other industry in the country, says Len Nichols, director of the Center for Health Policy Research and Ethics at George Mason University? The bottom line is that Americans want innovation. We need it, but we're over-incentivizing it. And look at the profit margins. We have to do something to drive the prices of drugs down. 75% of Americans believe that drug companies are putting profits before actually helping people. And the only people who are wrong are the 25% who don't realize that that's exactly what is happening. If your doctor tells you you need to take a drug, you may not need to take that drug. The woman with Wilson's disease needs to take that drug. There is not an herb that's going to replace that drug. But that is a tiny fraction of the people taking drugs. Consumer Reports in the January 2011 issue looked at how to reduce the cost of your medications. Certainly with the prices going up and up like this, people are looking more and more to how can I save money on my drugs. And one of the things that's happening is this is opening up a black market for medications. AARP Bulletin, May 2016, black market medicines are flooding the nation's pharmacies and hospitals. By all accounts, the drug supply in the United States is among the safest and most controlled in the world, but it is currently under a growing threat from criminals who are pushing stolen, out-of-date, adulterated, and fake medications, which are in pharmacies, nursing homes, hospitals, and doctors' offices. These drugs may be medically worthless or even toxic. Federal agents seized about $73 million in counterfeit drugs in 2014, and that is a tiny slice of the black market drug trade, which exceeds about $200 billion internationally and accounts for 10% of the pharmaceuticals in the global supply chain. Where are you most likely to come into contact with these black market drugs? From small independent pharmacies in large cities, from pharmacies that sell drugs at cut-rate prices, from any place that sells drugs, especially places online at cut-rate prices. These are the places that are increasingly likely to be selling you counterfeit or illegitimate products. In 2012 and 2013, the FDA found a counterfeit version of a cancer drug that contained no active ingredient that was being sold across the country. The greatest risk of buying fake drugs comes to those who buy on the Internet. Pharmacies that mail drugs directly to consumers, often without a prescription, are going to be pharmacies that are most likely to be selling black-marketed drugs. A 2014 report by the Government Accountability Office found 36,000 rogue Internet pharmacies selling drugs that contained too much, too little, or no active ingredient. Some of those drugs contain dangerous contaminants, including heavy metals, rat poison, and toxic highway paint. Sellers often advertise as being Canadian to project an air of legitimacy, but a 2005 Food and Drug Administration study found that 85% of the online pharmacies were based in 27 other countries rather than the United States or Canada, no matter what they were saying. If you are shopping online, you have the verified Internet pharmacy practice sites, VIPPS, which are accredited through the National Association of the Boards of Pharmacies. Look for VIPPS and don't do business with companies that sell prescription drugs if you don't have a prescription. That should be a very big red flag that the drugs they are selling are not going to be the drugs that you want to take. Unfortunately, if you do take a black market drug and something horrible happens to you, there's probably nothing you can do about it. First of all, the evidence, oops. You take it. Once it's injected, once it's ingested, the evidence is gone. New York lawyer Eric Turkowitz, who settled a civil lawsuit for an undisclosed sum on behalf of Timothy Fagan, a New York man who suffered severe muscle cramps after an injection of counterfeit drugs following a liver transplant, says you're not going to see any uproar until counterfeit drugs kill 100 people, and it's going to happen soon. Don't let you be one of those people that it happens to. When we are looking at drug problems, it's not just the physical problems that drugs can cause us. There are problems with the cost of drugs. There are problems with black market of drugs. And there are the out of generic drugs. If you have not heard about generic drugs, ask your doctor about generic drugs. It is probably the safest way to save money on your prescription. And not just doctors, but I see that many large chain pharmacies are now offering to switch your prescription to a far less expensive one, and that means they are switching you to the generic drug. That's just what we were talking about, that they're preventing that from happening to Humira. They're preventing a generic from being made, but many of the most popularly prescribed drugs are available in generic form. Whatever kind of drug we are taking, it is critically important that we ask ourselves, where was it actually made? What kind of quality control was in place when this drug was made? And what are the sanitation standards and the contamination. I noticed in an article from Life Extension that they found that one of the leading drug manufacturers in the world, Schering Plough, has repeatedly been caught failing to put active ingredient into their asthma inhalers. They were fined $500 million, but nonetheless, they continue to ship out asthma inhalers containing little or no albuterol, leading to as many as 17 deaths, according to the Public Citizens Health Research Group. Yes, massive recalls were done, and the FDA has set strict quality control terms on them in a consent decree. Nonetheless, we are not just talking about that specifically. We are talking about the fact that when we are taking drugs, even though supposedly they are regulated, we simply don't know enough about what is happening. It takes a tremendous faith to actually take a drug that's been made you don't know where, under what circumstances, and to then look at yourself and say, can I deal with the side effects of this drug, and can I deal with the drug interactions as well? Next week, we are going to move into looking at how to be safe if we take drugs, including looking at the whole, I must admit, rather convoluted difficulties with interactions between drugs, between drugs and supplements, and between drugs and foods. To finish up this week, however, I want to talk about a very interesting book called Drug Muggers. This is by Susie Cohen, and Drug Muggers is a book which puts forth the research showing that most drugs deplete one or more necessary substances from our bodies. At least half of the drugs approved in the United States commonly deplete specific nutrients. More drugs probably deplete nutrients. We just don't have the data to prove it yet. The mechanisms by which the drugs do this vary. The drug can grab hold of a nutrient in the gut and take it out of the system through the gastrointestinal tract, and that's called chelation. But the drug can also alter the acidity in your gastrointestinal or urinary tract, especially in the gastrointestinal tract. Altering the acidity means we get far less minerals. Drugs can stimulate or inhibit enzymes involved in the transport of nutrients around your body. So you may be eating an excellent diet. The digestibility of your food may be excellent and your digestive system working fine, and they're getting into your blood, but the enzymes that transport those nutrients out of your blood and into the actual cellular matrix have been stimulated or inhibited by the drugs that you're taking. Drugs can also bind directly to specific nutrients and inactivate them. Drugs can also stimulate or inhibit enzymes involved in turning nutrients into more usable substances. We are not going to go into organic chemistry this evening, but suffice it to say that in order for our chemistry set to actually feed our cells, we have to do more than just chew up our food and swallow it. And there are a lot of enzymes involved in this, and drugs can interfere with those. Certain drugs require specific nutrients in order to work. So drugs can bind to a protein or require a specific nutrient, and by virtue of taking that, you're going to be needing more of that nutrient. This book, then, is dedicated to telling you which nutrients are being taken out of your body by which drugs, and what you might consider doing about it. Let's look at the kinds of things that we have been focusing in on, which is pain relievers, opiate analgesics, and their derivatives are prescribed for a lot of different things: surgery, childbirth, dental work, arthritis, headaches, broken bones, however they were intended for short-term use. And they can interact with alcohol, kava kava, bananas, rice, sedating herbs like passion flower, hops, lemon balm, potatoes, apples, and smoking. In addition, pain-relieving drugs interfere with huge numbers of nutrients in our bodies. Salicylates interfere very strongly with calcium. And salicylates are found in aspirin, oxycodone, salicylate, and various other pain-relieving drugs, especially those put out for menstrual pain. Calcium is required by the uterus to prevent pain on contracting. And so when women take aspirin as a pain reliever for menstrual cramps and it binds to the calcium, they then have more pain in the future. Acetaminophen, Tylenol, is in hundreds of combination drugs. Many menstrual products, cough preparations, cold preparations, sleep aids. You need to get your magnifying glass and read the fine print, says Susie Cohen, especially if you are taking many medications, because Lortab contains acetaminophen, and you could easily ingest more than the amount that is safe to ingest on a daily basis. Alcohol is a no-no if you are taking this, as are citrus fruits, vitamin C, oatmeal, high-fiber cereal, and they claim that echinacea can interact with acetaminophen and create inflammation in the liver. Generally, when we read reports about drug-herb interactions, those herbs are in pill form. And so it would be quite different if you are actually taking the herb in a tea form, a tincture form, or some other form that you have made. The B vitamins seem to be pretty destroyed by all kinds of analgesics. Oxycodone and aspirin interfere with our ability to use vitamin B9, as well as glutathione and N-acetylcysteine. So we find that all analgesics rob the body of iron and melatonin. Interesting, isn't it, to think that we're taking a pain reliever like aspirin, ibuprofen, naproxen, oxycodone, or hydroxycodone containing drugs to be better able to get over the pain and sleep, and yet it interferes with melatonin, the specific substance that we need to sleep better. Analgesics of all kinds interfere with the potassium in our body, so important for good muscle function, and many analgesics also interfere with our ability to use vitamin C. You might be interested in Drug Muggers by Susie Cohen, put out by Rodale Press, if you're taking drugs and want to get an idea of where you might need to make your diet better. She, of course, suggests supplements. I'm not suggesting supplements. I think that you can probably cover the entire shortfall by your diet. Next week, how do we use drugs safely? Thanks so much for giving me this space and time to talk to everyone.
Thank you so much, Susan. And this concludes part 47 of our series, The 7 Medicines the Wise Woman Way with Susan Wheat at Time Monk Radio.